some pain. A little bit better now. A lot of times people are afraid of getting or looking old, and it's because they equate youth with their ability to enjoy life, and they equate maybe their appearance and certain activities with their youth. And it's an illusion in a way, because there are plenty of older looking people or older people who are more youthful in mind and body than many teenagers today, even in appearance rather than just mind. And there are many teenagers, many youths who are not maturing in the way that gives them the satisfaction of the adult. And so a person who wants the appearance, and most people do, and they want that to match the experience. So if they want to look young, they want to feel young. If they feel young, they want to enjoy life. More or less, always coming back to how we view life and experience day-to-day existence as children, where there is no restriction. It's not that there's so much enjoyment in everything that's done, it's that there's much less restriction, and therefore the natural energy status, I guess, of our being is an enjoyment. And this gets compressed and molded, and if we allow external commands and conformity and the preconceptions of others to shape that for us, then our lives fit into a molded, squared cube, and the natural experience, especially that of the child, is never that squared. The edges are never that sharp. It is playful and flowing freely, and that brings enjoyment. Now, where there may be a problem or a difficulty is that when people want to obtain or retain the appearance and the feeling of youth, and they apply the experience of enjoyment with the appearance of youth, and the appearance of youth with the feeling of youth, you get this preconceptualized requirement or expectations for how we have to behave and appear to others, and basically maintain a quota of experience that is confirmed by mutual, witnesses that we are who we want to be, and that person, that image, relates to what we viewed as enjoyable as children, and possibly the desirable, maybe even trendy existence that we could imagine for ourselves in the future as we were children, which is all illusion. And a piece of advice is that, when people go to events, certain situations, basically, they make parties, things like that, and they put themselves out there, and they want the respect and, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me if I do. Excuse me. They want the acknowledgement of youth, and it's like a child wanting attention. So that works when we're beginning to understand our social interactions and energetic cues, how others and their responses relate to how we view ourselves. But that isn't where it ends. It may never end, but I know after that there is a phase or a plateau where there's a period in your life where you will begin to desire recognition, not for your appearance and not for the experience that you can more or less advertise or choreograph to others, living viscerally through your or vicariously through your friends, through society, living vicariously through how society views you. And it goes from that and the interaction into something a bit more intellectual, and I don't really know how to describe it other than that. Because all I'm referencing here is basically carving your path out of life as an adult based upon somewhat recognition, but more so recognition as it accounts for your work, your internal work, your progress, and what you're producing, your productivity. But in that way, carving your path based upon what you offer to society as a whole, not from your personal, local recognition from others, which makes you feel all tingly and happy, though it goes away and it really doesn't mean anything. It's just it's temporary sensation, and it is enjoyable. And as children, we learn the ways of society through that. But when we cling to that, it's a one-way street and it leads to a dead end. And so instead of judging ourselves for how others view us and how they respond, especially if it's something subjective and opinionated and not based upon what's really being, the work that's being done, the intellect, or even the type of art that's being provided. Because often, if there's an artist, it's not always about how it appears to be, but about what you can learn from the work of art, about what it means under the surface through an incorporation of multiple layers of meaning and being and reference and integration of knowledge, and how that can then act as a reference or a metaphor to relating to the multiple layers of a person's existence. And in that way, a work of art is a living being. And so, if we base ourselves, our productivity, our worth off of that, is pretty much more difficult. Because if you're not the best at what you do immediately, it's just going to suck. It's kind of like being, almost like, maybe for some people, for introverts, it's like being social for the first time. If anybody can go back to kindergarten. It's like awkward, and it's like aliens, basically. Aliens is the best way to describe it. Trying to like figure out how bodies work. And so when you pick up a trade that's not, mechanical or something like that, unless it's based upon subjectivity as far as woodworking or artistic painting, and, house painting even goes into subjectivity because everybody has their own style and they clean up their lines different ways, and there's different pay grades and professionalism levels. But the more subjective it is, and the more intellectual it is, the more one will have to apply worth that is invisible, that you can't just look at and immediately recognize it unless you're, in that field or knowledgeable in that field. And that this is like the multi-dimensional work to produce something of value for society, which requires just as much to fully understand the product or the production as it does require energy being put in, and care and time being put into the production until you get good enough where you can just like slap it out, or you're an adept or a prodigy or something like that. In which point you just you're a lucky one. But everybody does have their own prodigal skills. You just have to find it, to find what you can connect to your mind through your heart, and not just to your mind. What we perceive to be benefit or enjoyment that is purely mental is often lacking the heart, and it's a form of sensation, perceptual fulfillment of desire, which is temporary and illusory, and it doesn't offer anything to the people, and it doesn't offer anything to ourselves. It's a binary concept. It's basically just pressing buttons and seeing what happens. So in changing and maturing, it's not that we don't care about certain things anymore. It's caring more about things that we didn't have the intellect or the competence to understand before. And this is the way that we can personally influence the world at large and offer something that others have not or cannot in the way that we do it. Everybody has something. So think about that. See where your enjoyment is coming from and where you're chasing it if you feel like it is lacking. See where your expectations are, and see where your social interactions are if you go out to converse in certain ways or network, or if you're going out to provide an appearance. You can do whatever you want, but when we mature, we can do both. But when we actually have that productive value, we'll end up usually sticking to the productive value, because if you're an awesome painter or something, I don't want to throw names out or anything like that, but I don't think of some painters. I don't want to think of historic painters. Someone like Alex Gray. He was in a few posts recently. If you have a great talent like that, and then there's certain events, and say people are just going to an event and they just want to provide an appearance and have like a cheek clique that presents themselves a certain way, that's probably not going to be on the itinerary. It would be much more interesting, maybe not all the time, but say a few months of not having anything to do with that, and of course, without having done it for 40 years straight. If you're at an art festival or something like that, or you're showing your work, or you're just at an event, and people want to talk about art and that work, after a while, I'm sure it gets old, but sitting there and, saying, no, I'm just going to like front and my back on the wall and act all cool, like that's childish. It doesn't offer the same intensity, the stimulation, the enjoyment as providing our work for society, for the world, for others. And that's for society as a whole. It's not just a locale. Because when you produce something, it stays. It makes a mark. It carves. Those are just some thoughts. There's some more thoughts in there coming around. Yeah, I haven't slept in a while. I mean, I have, but it's weird. I like the weird nights. Reminiscent of different times. Imagine living in the 1800s and every night is a weird night. Alright, thank you.